Jakarta in the world. I'm Doug Johnson, and this is White Trash Talking. In this week's episode, I want to talk about President Trump's cabinet nominations and who the people are and what the choices mean in terms of the future. And in 2016, Donald Trump promised to drain the swamp and then surprised everyone with his selection of people like John Bolton and Pompeo, neocons and warhawks, to join his staff. And this time, he's made similar promises in addition to ending wars and creating financial prosperity. And again, he's raising eyebrows and raising alarm with his choices. All of them, without exception, are Zionists. And a few, which we will talk about today, are warhawks, with particular animosity towards China and Iran, and in fact advocate attacking both countries as well as others. Okay, so I want to start by just showing who some of these nominees are. This is a very partial list, and it was done early on in the process. And today I'm going to talk about Marco Rubio quite a bit. He's been nominated for Department of State. And Pete Hegseth, I will talk about, as well as Elise Stefanik. And I will also talk about Mike Huckabee. Missing from this list is Mike Waltz. He's missing. He's National Security Advisor, important figure, but I won't be dealing with him today. Okay, so these are some of the choices. It's interesting that Tulsi Gabbard is on there, Elon Musk, just kind of all over the place. All right, so what I want to do is start out by listening to the views of Ben Norton, and he's a host of Geopolitical Economy. And he's going to talk a little bit about the cabinet choices and what they mean. So let's listen to what he has to say.
Donald Trump is coming back to the White House for a second term, and in his cabinet, he has surrounded himself with warhawks and neoconservatives. In order to run the U.S. State Department and oversee foreign policy, Trump nominated Marco Rubio, an extreme pro-war neocon who has strongly supported every single major war in the U.S. In recent years, Rubio has pushed very hard for war on both China and Iran.
We do have near-peer adversaries. We didn't 25 years ago. The United States lived in a unipolar world where we were the only show in town. Now there are at least one unprecedented near-peer adversary. The Chinese Communist Party is a challenge to the United States, unlike greater even than what the Soviet Union was, because they are a commercial rival, a technological rival, a geopolitical rival, a diplomatic rival, and a commercial one. And in addition to all of that, they are also a military threat to the country as they continue to develop.
Okay, this really is reminiscent of the Project for a New American Century. Was a document written in the late 1990s and was in force in the early 2000s. And it's a blueprint by which George W. Bush followed. And it was written by Paul Wolfowitz, and it called for total global dominance. Full spectrum dominance is what the term they used, in order to prevent the emergence of, quote, any potential future competitor. Now, this was written at a time when the U.S. was a unipolar power after the collapse of the Soviet Union. And this is a new age now. You know, we're no longer the sole power. It's a multipolar world. And to be castigating China for being a near-peer rival, it seems to violate the principles of fair competition in a global world of capitalism. I mean, this is crazy. Okay, so let's continue and listen further to Ben Norton.
And all of the nominees to be top officials in the upcoming Trump administration agree on pushing for war on both China and Iran. All of them are extremely pro-Israel and anti-Palestinian.
Israel represents everything we want that region of the world to be. A democracy, free enterprise, and a strong American ally. Don't we wish the entire Middle East looked that way? It is a nation with a special and unique purpose, unlike any other nation in the world. And I, for one, am proud that the United States has stood with Israel for all these years.
Senator Rubio, will you call for a ceasefire?
No, I will not.
in Gaza?
On the contrary,
Senator
I want them to destroy every element of Hamas they can get their hands on. These people are vicious animals.
And what about the civilians that are being killed every day?
Hamas should stop hiding behind civilians, putting civilians in the way.
And Marco Rubio has constantly called for the U.S. government to attack Iran. In October, a month before the presidential election, he called for threatening the survival of the Iranian regime through maximum pressure and direct and disproportionate measures. When he says direct measures, he means directly attacking Iran, bombing Iran, and he insists that the U.S. attacks should be disproportionate.
Last week, I played a recording of Shahid Bolson, and he said that the U.S. has a longstanding pattern of hating and dehumanizing the people who occupy the places where the U.S. has something that they want. In this case, the U.S.'s proxy army, the Israelis, want all of the land from the river to the sea. They want the Palestinians' land, and you heard Marco Rubio call them animals. This is part of the long-standing pattern of the U.S. to hate and dehumanize when there's something you want from them. Okay, let's continue.
Rubio is also a religious fundamentalist, and he sees the U.S. as the leader of the so-called Judeo-Christian West and claims that it's in a civilizational war against Chinese communism and against Muslims in countries like Iran. And on Twitter, he constantly posts extremely hawkish quotes from the Bible that talk about the war that broke out in heaven, and Michael and his angels battled against the dragon. So this is a very clear sign that he wants to prepare for an apocalyptic world war led by the U.S. empire against China and their allies. This extremist view is also shared, by the way, by Donald Trump's defense secretary, the Fox News host, Pete Hegseth. He wrote a book called American Crusade, saying very clearly that he is a Christian Western crusader fighting against the non-Christian communist East, and Hegseth has tattoos of the Crusades. He's a proud crusader. That's what he sees himself as. So the Trump administration is led by neo-colonialist warmongers who want to wage war all around the world to save the colonialist West.
Okay, I do not believe that Marco Rubio actually believes this biblical, pseudo-biblical nonsense that he's spewing. He's just touting his base. He's signaling to his base, and he's just on the take. He's collecting AIPAC money, and he's drumming up support for a war against Iran and against the Palestinians, and this is his way to do it. And if you're not familiar with this evangelical view that he's referring to, they actually want the end of the world, because then the Messiah, Jesus, will return. And they believe that this is biblical prophecy, and they interpret it literally, so they want the destruction of Israel. I mean, this is lunacy. This is mental illness, in a sense. Okay, and I do not believe that Rubio actually believes this, but he pretends like he does. Okay, let's finish up with Ben Norton.
if you just take a glance at Marco Rubio's Twitter account, you can see that he is the most unhinged neocon out there. He's constantly tweeting, condemning Cuba, Nicaragua, China, Russia, Iran, North Korea. I mean, this is the exact same foreign policy of John Bolton and George Bush. And Donald Trump has surrounded himself with these Bush-era neocons once again, just as he did in his first administration.
And you got to wonder why he's doing that. I mean, is this a prelude to World War III, a planned prelude for World War III? Or is this Donald Trump carrying a big stick and BSing? You know, is this just to have it in the background as a threat while he makes the deal? I don't know. I'm a little bit scared, to be honest with you. Okay, so now I want to look at Al Jazeera's, an article from Al Jazeera in which they look at a few of the other nominees. And this is from an article called "What Have Trump Administration Nominees Said About Israel and Its Wars?" And the subtitle is, "While pro-Israel views are common in U.S. politics, Trump's picks signal support for far-right Israeli aspirations." Far-right Israeli aspirations would include owning from the river to the sea, the expulsion of all of the Palestinians, the killing or the expulsion of all of them, and greater Israel actually beyond the river and the sea, perhaps taking Lebanon and so on. The Suez Canal, who knows, okay? So the first person I want to look at is Pete Hegseth. He's a nominee for Secretary of Defense. And according to Al Jazeera, Hegseth in an interview said he grew up a Baptist and never met a Jewish person until he attended college. So I guess he lived in a bubble. But he accused higher education of spreading the, quote, seeds of anti-Semitism. I don't know that that's going on. I went to college. I wasn't exposed to any anti-Semitism. Anyway, so he also said that, referring to Israel, this is not some mystical land that can be dismissed. It is the story of God's chosen people. Okay, what he's doing is taking a 5,000-year-old text, 3,500, I don't know exactly how many years, and he's interpreting it literally when it was written metaphorically, and he's applying it to modern-day land ownership, which is just lunacy. It's beyond crazy. People that believe this should be locked up. They need medication. I don't know. Okay, so let's continue. Hegseth also appeared to endorse demolishing the Al-Aqsa Mosque, one of the holiest sites in Islam, to make room for a third temple, a long-standing goal of Israeli ultranationalists and evangelical Christians. Okay, I used to live in Palestine. I worked in Jenin for 3 years, and I used to visit Israel any chance I got. I enjoyed it very much, in fact. This is back in the early 2000s, mid-2000s. And I visited the Al-Aqsa Mosque, and it's a World Heritage Landmark, and it's one of the holiest sites in Islam. And so Pete Hegseth, in one of his tours to the site, said, "And as you stand there, you can't help but behold the miracle before you." And it got me thinking about another miracle that I hope all of you don't see too far away. Because 1917 was a miracle. That was the year of the Balfour Declaration. 1948 was a miracle. That was the creation of Israel and also the Palestinian disaster, the Nakba. 1967 was a miracle. That was the Six-Day War. 2017, the declaration of Jerusalem as the capital was a miracle. Well, I beg to differ. And there's no reason why the miracle of the reestablishment of the temple on the Temple Mount is not possible. Well, that requires tearing down one of the holiest sites in Islam. And I can assure you that if you touch one brick on the Al-Aqsa Mosque, it's not going to be just Palestinian Muslims fighting. It's going to be a war in itself. I mean, it's not going to happen, but if it does, it's disastrous. And he's just showing his blind foolishness for such outrageous and irresponsible talk. And he's been picked to be the number 2 spot, just under Donald Trump, to head the military. All right, now let's look at Mike Huckabee. He's nominated for U.S. Ambassador to Israel. And says here, Mike Huckabee is an evangelical Christian and strong supporter of Greater Israel, a term used to describe the proposed Israeli annexation of Palestinian territory. Okay, in 2008, Huckabee argued that being Palestinian was a made-up identity. I actually heard him say that in a clip one time. He said, "There is really no such thing as a Palestinian," Huckabee said. "You have Arabs and Persians, and you have such complexity within that. There's really no such thing. That's been a political tool to try to force land away from Israel." Well, that's just Israeli propaganda. If you look at early maps going back to the 1700s, you'll see Palestine on the map. The people living there are Palestinians. And yeah, they're Arab. They're Arab Palestinians, Palestinian Arabs. Just like if you live in America, you're American. If you live in Palestine, you're Palestinian. So it's not a made-up identity. Okay? Let's go on. Regarding Huckabee, he also described Israel's illegal settlements in the West Bank as the fulfillment of biblical prophecy. And he said, when people use the term occupy, I say, yeah, Israel is occupying the land, but it's an occupation of a land that God gave to them 3,500 years ago. It is their land. The title deed was given by God to Abraham and to his heirs. So you want to talk occupation? I never use the term West Bank. I find it offensive. We're talking about Judea and Samaria. All right, this man is unhinged. Again, he's using a text written back in the time of the Israelites, not the Israelis, and he's claiming that a text written that long ago gives you legal claim over land now, the equivalent of a legal title deed. No law in the world is going to recognize that, and he knows it. And that's the lunacy of all of this. It's just sheer nonsense. Okay, let's move on to Elise Stefanik. She was nominated for ambassador to the UN. Elise Stefanik was the one who participated in congressional hearings about anti-Semitism on college campuses. And her blunt questioning of several university leaders helped precipitate several resignations. The students were protesting the Gaza genocide. And, you know, I applaud them. They're brave, they're good, they were doing the right thing. And the universities that did not crack down on these students were under attack by people like Elise Stefanik. And they were able to get the police out on the students and beat them up and chase them away. And that act itself is amoral, immoral, and criminal. And critics say that this also contributed, to the crackdown of student demonstrators. Stefanik described Israel's war on Gaza as a moral crusade. And she has called for the withdrawal of U.S. funds from UNRWA, the UN Agency for Palestinian Refugees. Okay, a moral crusade. I guess a Christian crusade. That's the reason for the genocide. Okay, so she's aligning herself with genocide. And she's advocating the withdrawal of UNRWA funds. It's one of the few life-preserving lifelines that was available to Palestinians who are starving and who are near death and who are being slaughtered daily. So this is the woman that the U.S. will have represent them at the UN. And that's Donald Trump's choice. Okay, so I want to finish this by listening to Douglas McGregor, who's a former colonel of the U.S. military, and he's a go-to guy for military analysis and common sense, really. But let me just play what he has to say.
He has hitched his wagon 100% to the Zionist cause in the Middle East, which means war to expand the state of Israel and destroy everyone that Israel doesn't like or Israel fears. That includes, first and foremost, Iran. I think he and his team are committed to that objective. That's where we're headed. If anybody has any questions about it, start paying attention to what people actually say. At some point, you have to listen to people and believe them. And President Trump has made very clear statements about Iran and where he expects to go. And if anything, he's being critical for the most part of the Biden administration for not doing enough against Iran. And what we're headed towards right now is really the storm of the century.
A storm of the century, World War III. I don't know about you people listening, but I'm afraid. And this has got a momentum of its own now, and at this point it may be hard to stop. Let's finish up with Douglas McGregor.
A lot of people invested very heavily in him for the purpose of getting him elected so that he would back the war against Iran. That needs to be understood. Now, it's very, very difficult under the circumstances for him to ignore that, even though it's obviously in the interest of the American people, in my judgment, to stay away from that option. But he has to take their views into consideration. Anybody who thinks that money in politics really doesn't buy you anything is wrong. Money buys a lot. And cold hard cash in great quantities has a reasoning of its own. And you can't survive in politics without it, or at least that's the view. And that's where we are. And it's not just President Trump, it's the entire government.
What could he do to navigate that, try to thread that needle you're talking about there, but with these people he has in place to still get them to do his vision of the world and keep us out of wars?
Well, I'm not sure that's his vision.
Yeah. Even someone like Douglas McGregor, who has worked with Donald Trump, doesn't know what Donald Trump is up to. People are speculating. I'm scared, like I said. But Douglas McGregor mentioned the money, and I don't know, probably about 6 months ago, Miriam Edelson, the wife of, I forget his first name, but the wife of one of the major contributors to the Republican Party and a strong Zionist, gave Donald Trump about $20 million. And I was alarmed back then because he accepted it, of course. And now he's beholden to that cause. Whatever they're buying, he's now got to deliver on that. And it's a matter of time to see what they've actually bought and how far Trump will actually go on this. Okay, I'm going to stop there. If you like this, please give it a like, and please subscribe. And I really appreciate you listening and joining me every week if you do. And I'll see you in 1 week. Take care. Bye.